This episode of the Martial Arts Icons podcast is brought to you by Twin Dragons USA. Twin Dragons USA. Etsy.com/shop/Twin Dragons USA. Hello and welcome to the Martial Arts Icons podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Aldaz, and this is the first episode of the Martial Arts Icons podcast. My guest on today's program is somebody I consider to be one of the founding fathers of American Ninjitsu. He's perhaps one of the most prolific authors on the subject of ninjitsu in American history. Perhaps the world, folks. He has written classic titles such as Ninja Death Touch, Secrets of the Ninja, Ninja Secrets of Invisibility, Forbidden Fighting Techniques of the Ninja, and my favorite, a fan favorite, Ninja Mind Control. He is also a Grand Master of the IFA, Black Dragon Fighting Society, and most well-known and best-selling ninja author of all time. Joining me now is Master Ashida Kim on the program. Hello, Ashida.
Hello there. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to be speaking with you.
Thank you. So how many books on ninjitsu have you written? I believe it's been over 50, right?
More or less. It's somewhere right around that number. or particularly on ninjitsu. Some were on, other topics that were related to ninjitsu, but there have been about 50 on that particular subject, yeah.
Wow. So I have to ask, how did you get started in martial arts? I believe you started off in Shotokan, but you must have done judo when you were younger, correct?
Yes, when I was small or younger, and my father was in the Army, and we were stationed on different Army bases around the country, and usually there was a judo club on the base somewhere, and I usually managed to find it. And of course, being a kid and these guys being professional soldiers, they really weren't particularly interested in helping me learn anything, so they let me watch quite a bit. And I learned a lot about how to fall and had a really good dojo experience there. I was always amazed at how they could knock each other out with a sleeper hold and then bring each other back to life. I thought that was just incredible. And so then when I got into high school, we had a little wrestling team for a short period of time, and I was on the wrestling team. And so I had learned, Count Dante's techniques. And then from there, when I was in the Army, I really learned ninjitsu and really developed the techniques that were in there. So.
Right, you learned the dim mak from Dante, correct?
More from his student, Lawrence Day.
You provided security with the Black Dragon Fighting Society back in the Count Dante days when, what was it, the Democratic Convention at the time?
Yeah, the 1968 Democratic Convention. There was a lot of political unrest at the time, and there were going to be a lot of protests up there. And like I said, one of the guys that was in the karate school with me, his brother was in the motorcycle club, and they were going to be doing security up there. And so they invited us to come up and join them, and so we did, and really didn't have too much to do, mostly just, keeping people getting hurt and doing minor medical procedures and things like that. One of the main things is helping people get over tear gas and whatnot. So, but like I said, during that time, that's when I met Count Dante and at a school up there, and a Chinese school up there, and we learned Kata Dante one night, and that was one of the great things about it was you could learn it in a very short period of time, but then perfecting it and making it really super effective might take a little while longer. But that's one of the reasons why I enjoy teaching is because you can learn the whole thing in an hour, and it's got every major fist and every major vital and fatal point, to strike in it. And then it's just a matter of practicing until you can do it hard enough and fast enough. So it's a very good, simple, complete system, and which was much different than the Shotokan that I've been studying before, which was very formal and very traditional, and a lot of katas and a lot of one-steps and things like that.
Right. Kata, I mean, if you use Qigong also, which is like a form of breathing, that's basically what all katas are, right? It's like breathing and breathing while doing the kata always.
Right, yeah, there are a lot of the katas, especially there's one called Senchen that shows up in a lot of different styles, and that's a very dynamic breathing exercise form. But the katas do teach you a certain pattern of breathing and rhythm of when you're practicing and things like that, and so they're very good for on many different levels. And so they said a lot of people, when I first started out in martial arts, most people didn't think kata was very important.
Right.
They wanted to do one steps and they wanted to do just basic drills. But kata is really where the books are. I mean that's where all the techniques are hidden. And a lot of times there are techniques in the forms that you're not aware of until you get to upper levels of instruction.
Right. I noticed that the Goju Ryu style and the Shotokan kata, they kind of mix in together, and it's more like I practice it more of like a defensive blocking, like to be ready for a counterattack or do defensive, but like you said, yeah, they didn't really consider kata to be that important, like Motobu Ryu, Motobu Choki, the original Kumite champion. He said that kata was useless and that it was all about kumite and like sparring, fighting, real life fighting.
And I think a lot of schools over here in the beginning did that as a part of what they were interested in. I know, particularly Count Dante's thing, there was a lot of sparring and fighting in that particular situation or that particular group because they thought that was the most important part. And so it was. But like I said, most of the commercial schools over here, I think, started off with that idea of let's do a bunch of sparring because everybody enjoys sparring. But then once people started getting hurt, and then they had to develop all of the safety punch, safety kick gear, and then once people still started getting hurt, you went to more of a commercial system where the techniques they taught were very safe. And I mean, a lot of times they didn't.
Right.
Some of these systems don't even teach self-defense; they just teach just katas and just forms.
That's why Count Dante was so infamous because people were getting hurt left and right.
Right. And there were a lot of people that he hurt personally. I mean, one of the things about Count Dante, he was not really a very nice person when you come right down to it. I mean, my impression was that he really liked to hurt people, and he didn't mind showing you that he didn't mind hurting people.
Yeah.
So he was.
He had a mean streak in him.
He was very much a tough guy.
Yes, a Chicago tough guy. We'll get to him. We'll get to him a little bit later, Master Kim. But I've seen your work in various movies, such as Enter the Ninja, American Ninja, which I believe is based on your friend Master Dukes. Even the original Batman from 1989. I mean, he uses a batarang. That's like a ninja star. He uses the smoke weapons, the invisibility, like you teach, and they're using all this stuff in the 80s when you were, at your most prolific and not that you're not prolific now, but in the 80s when you released your masterpieces, they were reading your material. They were looking at it for their scripts in DC Comics, such as Batman. How do you feel about Batman? I mean, he's a ninja, right?
Yeah, he is now, so to speak, because at some point the producers realized that Batman had a lot of ninja characteristics, a lot of ninja weapons, and this kind of thing, and it would be an interesting thing to go back and bring him into the ninja mythology as somebody who had trained in one of these secret ninja schools, and it hadn't been revealed until now, of course, because the ninja whole thing was a secret. And so, but essentially, Batman got adopted into the ninja mythology, and which is fine because he does a lot of techniques that you would find in ninjutsu, and one of the main techniques he uses is the whole idea of the frightening costume, which was the demon mask school in ninjutsu.
That's right.
The idea was to scare the guy to death, and while he's being frightened, that's when you jump on him and knock him out or so that was one of Batman's original premises was the idea that he would, when he appeared in front of these people, he would scare them to death. And, and he used fear as one of his weapons, which was one of the weapons of the ninja back in the old days, because people were scared to death.
That's right, Master Kim. He's based, the Batman costume is based off of Aztec deity known as Kamutz or something, like a real Aztec Mesoamerican demon.
Was the one that came up with Batman, and Batman originally was very much like the Shadow. He somebody told Bob Kane, because there were different comic book companies competing with each other, for readership. And so they were kind of together quite a bit. And the Shadow was a very popular character at the time. So, and Batman was very much like him. But somebody told Bob Kane that Batman was too much like the Shadow. And so he decided, well, okay, the Shadow shoots people, so I'll fix it so Batman doesn't have a gun. And that's basically how the utility belt got developed and all the special tools. And then they said Batman became quite a phenomenon. One of the reasons Batman was popular, and one of the reasons why I think ninjitsu is popular, is because Batman is considered a superhero, but he's an ordinary human being who trained himself to do superhero things. And it gives ordinary people hope that they can learn to do these kind of things too and get some justice or at least not be preyed upon anymore. So this is one of the things I was talking to somebody about the other day about wearing the mask. One of the ideas of having the mask in ninjitsu is not only so they don't know who you are, but also so you don't know who you are. So you become a different person when you put on that mask. And the great thing about it is anybody can be under that mask. So you don't want to go around aggravating people because anyone is liable to sneak up on you in the middle of the night with his mask on and get even. So it's very good for keeping people civil with each other for the most part. But so like I said, there's a great many angles or aspects to all of these different ninjitsu techniques. And like I said, the mask is just one of them. And not only is the scare part, but also the anonymity part, and also the diminishing of the ego part. So.
Wow, yeah. Batman is an ordinary man, and ninjitsu made him extraordinary.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And this is, one of the things that, like I said, it gives ordinary people hope that they can achieve great things.
That's
so
right.
It's and that's something that you need. I mean, nobody can be Superman. Everybody can admire Superman. Everybody can try to be like Superman.
Oh, Superman's an alien. He's an alien.
Nobody can be Superman. Right. And the same thing with most of these other superheroes. And, there's something special about them that makes them, it gives them some superpower, some power that other people don't have, as opposed to, you take some character like Doctor Strange, for example. Doctor Strange is another ordinary person who learned a secret art and then became a superhero.
Right. He's a sorcerer, a magician, right.
Batman was one of the early ones. So.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that Batman is a Russian military officer also, because I've noticed that the Batman symbol is the same as Russia's secret military intelligence.
Well, maybe they stole it from him or he stole it from them. So.
Maybe he's working with the commies.
Well, either way, it has the same effect. It has the terrifying effect that you're looking for.
Right.
And that's one of the things like with the Nazis after World War II. The symbol of the SS, became something that was absolutely terrifying. And people didn't even want to be around people that had that symbol on, because they knew these guys were just utterly brutal and ruthless.
Right.
And so they had a reputation that they upheld quite well.
Right, now it's the symbol for the Flash, who is Batman's friend, the SS bolt.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Now, the ninja are known, Ashida, for their art of escape, for escaping. They don't necessarily have to win the fight. They could win by escaping. Now, they also have escape rooms. Tell us about that, how ninjas going back historically, they have escape rooms and the art of ninja escape.
Okay, well, a lot of especially the system that I work with, is based on the idea of not fighting more at all, but rather prevailing, which basically means to get what you want without having to fight anybody, and there's no winner or loser. And so, in Seiko Fujita, who was one of the last known or recognized ninja in Japan, one of his advice when dealing with self-defense was, when you find yourself in a situation of confrontation, the first thing you should think of is how to get out of there. Okay, so I mean, even though he was a deadly ninja master, knew all the death touch points and acupuncture and things like this, his advice was, don't fight with anybody, run away, which was usually what the particular system that I worked with was based on. And the whole system was based on the idea of throwing sand in the eyes or the opponent's eyes to make him blink so that you could run away. And so that was the invisibility part of it. And that's, they said, the foundation of this particular system. And then the other escape techniques work off of that. There's for instance, one of the things that I practice that not a lot of other martial arts schools practice is a straitjacket escape. And there's a series of techniques that you can use to get out of a straitjacket like a magician. And learning how to do it teaches you certain things that you get only on a subliminal level. This is the same sort of thing as we were saying earlier about kata. A lot of things that you learn in kata are things that you don't realize you learned until much later. And so, like I said, then the other tanto, the other part of the escape system, is learning how to get out of handcuffs and rope ties and chains, manacles, things like this. Very much like Houdini would. And even in the Batman mythology, there's a certain amount of time that he spent with a magician learning how to get out of things like this, because he knew that at some point he would probably be captured by the bad guys, and it would behoove him to know how to escape. And so by studying with somebody who does escape tricks, you learn a lot of good ways of getting out of things or getting into things, as the case may be. So the escape room essentially is a test sort of a thing that some people use as a way of getting you to think outside the box and think of ways to get out of situations that would be impossible for other people to escape from. So some of these things, like I said, there are different ways of getting out of different types of escape rooms. Some of them are like cells, some of them are more like an apartment, this kind of thing. But in the ancient ninjitsu houses, they also had escape rooms where they could get away. It had secret panels. All you could do was touch them, and you could disappear through the wall, drop through things in the floor, hide in the attic, this sort of thing. And those were all ways that when the shogun's men came to kill everybody, you could either hide or you could get away long enough, get out of sight long enough that you could escape before they could catch you and massacre you. So because there were a lot of back in those days, there was a lot of genocide that went on, and whole families would be killed sometimes, just overnight because they pissed somebody off. And it was a pretty brutal system back in feudal Japan. So. Much like it is now, actually. So.
Oh yeah, now it's sophisticated death technology they possess from above.
Oh yeah.
We're speaking about ninja methods of attack with master martial arts icon Ashida Kim. You've discussed attacking from above. I've seen in your classic video documentaries how you attack the opponent or the enemy from above. You were mentioning how you can become invisible by blinding the opponent. I've also seen you move or counter move, defensively, moving or pivoting out of the opponent's triangle of power. That can make you invisible also. So let's discuss more of the ninja methods of attack. You've mentioned attacking from above also.
Right. Well, for instance, like you're talking about, there's some of these other invisibility or disappearing techniques. There's a system that's called 8 trigrams boxing or Bagua Chang, and the whole system is based on the idea of turning the opponent's corner. by doing a cross step in front of him so that you get behind him, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the same technique in most martial arts styles, where you step one step to the side, basically, and get behind the opponent. And in Ninjitsu, of course, take it further than that and use that as a way of escaping from the guy. But it's all about the circular and linear methods of getting behind the opponent so that you can ride the tiger's back, so that the tiger has a lot harder time hurting you if you're on his back. And so, and like I said, once you're behind him, then you're essentially invisible. So it's like I said, that's part of the system. And the attacking from above is one of the secret techniques, because most people don't look up. Most people, when they're searching, even people who are burglars, usually start searching at eye level, and that's not really the best way to look for things. If you want to search something, you want to start at the bottom. That way, if you dump stuff from the top, and you don't cover up anything that you haven't seen. And so they say, but most people don't look up when they're walking around, because for various cultural reasons that they don't. But being above them, you're essentially invisible, and until you drop down on top of them. And part of dropping down on top of them is knowing how to land in such a way that you disable them, fairly quickly. Good elbow strike with all your body weight behind it is a really good way of knocking somebody out from up above like that. So.
Wow. Incredible. Now, you mentioned how brutal it was back in feudal Japan. I want to mention some of those weapons that the ninja used, their origin. Is it true that the weapons of the ninja originate from simple farmers?
Well, there's a mythology in Okinawan Shotokan that really kind of goes along with that, and it makes a certain amount of sense, because if you're forbidden to have weapons like swords and knives and things like that, then you're going to have to pretty much use like carpenter tools and hammers and saws, and if you're a farmer, you've got these sickles and scythes and
Right, like the kunai. The kunai looks like a gardening tool.
Exactly. And the same sort of thing with some of the other more spear-like weapons that were developed, like the scythe, which was developed as a defense against the sword. Really doesn't have a farm application, but it's strictly developed to work against the sword.
Right.
So, but I think that to a certain degree that's true, but to a certain degree there's also amount of secret training that goes on with weapons that have been stolen or weapons that have been manufactured, under some cover of disguise or the other, because it's like if you make an analogous to like World War II, a lot of the underground people had guns, and they got them, they either manufactured them or they stole them from the Germans. So the same thing would be true in Japan in feudal times. If you didn't have a sword and you found a samurai sleeping somewhere, you might try to steal his sword, then you'd have one. And then you have to learn how to use it. But but most of these weapons are, like you said yourself, are improvised on the spur of the moment, nets and things like that. Most people don't consider a net to be a weapon, but in my particular system of ninjutsu, there's a whole series of techniques based on how to throw a blanket over somebody, which is essentially how to use a net if you're going to fight with a net in a combat situation. And you got to bear in mind, in the Colosseum in Rome, they actually had net men that had a trident and a net.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have a shield or a sword, but then they had to learn how to use this net as a weapon of entangling the enemy, basically.
Well, I believe also it was Marxist-Leninists would throw nets on their opposition.
Yeah. Well, one of the ninja weapons that I read about in one of the books was the idea of having a net with fish hooks in it, and then you throw that over the guy, and he's going to be pretty well busy for a while, because unless he stands real still, he's going to be sticking himself every couple of minutes, and he's going to have to work all those hooks out of it. And so a net with fish hooks attached, is a pretty serious impediment to movement. So like I said, but like I said, these guys are pretty ruthless. I mean, they weren't above setting fire to things to make people run out so they could chop them up. I mean, they were fighting for their lives, and they didn't mind, killing the enemy. So.
Right, and these weapons, they originate from Okinawa. It's the Kabuto training system, right? And you trained. Is it true? You trained a Koga Ryu. That's also kind of like a Kabuto weapons oriented ninjutsu, correct?
The style that I'm associated with was basically found in the Koga province, which is, of course is gone now. But there were two main provinces that had ninjutsu schools in them. One was the Koga and the other was the Iga. And the Iga was more well known because they've got more publicity over the years. But the Koga province was a lot more mountainous and things like that. But at any rate, the particular family that was living there that developed a system that I use or that I was taught was the Kimatake family. And and they're pretty much extinct now. But after the Shogun killed off all of them, or as many of them as he could. So, but like I said, it's not so much that it's a Koga-Ryu system. It's more that the system that I'm associated with was found in the Koga province. And so, but we do practice with a lot of weapons. I was telling somebody just the other day, there's basically five types of weapons. And one is like flexible weapons, like a whip or a nunchuck, a chain, stuff like that. You know, straight weapons, linear weapons like a bow and a spear and weapons like that. So once you learn how to use one of these weapons in each group, you have the principles that are going to be applied to all of the other weapons in that group. And so it's once you learn how to use the nunchuck, it's fairly easy to learn how to use a manriki, which was just a chain with two weights on the end of it. So, and because they're both flexible weapons.
Wow.
So, like I said, in our system, we do practice weapons, but it's not. Initially, a lot of ninja schools were known because of the special weapons that they use. Like shuriken was one of the first things. Nobody had ever heard of a shuriken until ninjutsu came along.
Right.
So, except for like Batman, because of the batarang. But
the ninja star.
Yeah. So all of these things, developed as a result of these things being brought out into the light. And before that was mostly throwing knives, much more than anything else, or hatchets, sort of a thing.
Wow.
But once people saw throwing stars, then everybody had to have one. And so, same thing with tabby boots. A lot of people made a fortune selling these tabby boots, and the ninja back in the old days didn't have these rubber-soled shoes like this. And they actually a lot of times squeaked on linoleum floors and things.
Oh no!
But what they would do is when they got close to the target area, they would just take their sandals off, and they would work in their socks because that way their feet didn't stick to the floor, and they didn't leave any wood footprints, and they were very quiet because the socks muffled any sound that they might make. So, but then, like I said, then when the ninja craze came along, everybody had to have special ninja boots. They were very expensive, and some of them didn't fit very well. And like I said, a lot of them had rubber soles that squeaked on linoleum, so they weren't really that quiet.
It defeats the purpose. The boots are loud.
Oh, exactly. But there is a shoe that is used by construction workers nowadays in Japan that has a very thick rubber sole on it and a soft cotton upper on it, and it only goes up ankle high. One of the things about these guys, they all made these tabby boots go up like all the way up to your knee. And a lot of times the little tabs would not stay hooked together in the back. And a lot of people took the tabs out and put Velcro there. And the next thing you know, they were selling the ones that had Velcro in the back. And so, like I said, the boot evolved basically to meet the market. But in the old days, it was just a sock. So, and actually I had a pair of these tabby socks that I trained in quite a bit until they were almost worn out, and I donated them to a sport museum in Texas a few years ago. And so, because they were very good. I mean, you can walk around in those tabby socks and be perfectly comfortable. That's the reason why they have a split toe is because you wear sandals with it. So it's not like it's, it's a magic boot, which is the way it eventually became in the ninja mythology, was that it was like a magic boot, but actually it was just a pair of socks.
Incredible, the secrets of ninjutsu with Ashida Kim. What is the ninja weapon that they use to climb with? It's like a climbing tool, also kind of like if you do an iron palm strike, you could have like claws right there in your palm. What is that tool, that weapon called?
A lot of companies, those are usually called a tekagi, basically. But what it is, it's spikes that you can put, use, like I said, to climb trees if you want. It's a band of metal that wraps around your hand that has 3 or 4 spikes attached to it on the inner surface. And sometimes it has a strap that goes around your wrist so that you can hook it on something and hang by your wrist if you want to. So without having to hold on to something, so to speak. But it's a lot of times they show them being used as a defense against swords because with an iron band around your hand, somebody chops at you, you put your hand up and supposedly catch the sword blade on that piece of metal. But you have to bear in mind your fingers are there, and so if you don't pull your fingers back, you're going to get cut anyway. The other thing is that these things are very difficult to climb with. I mean, they show you climbing trees, show people climbing trees with them and things like that.
Right.
But they're not really that comfortable to work with unless they fit just exactly right. Because if they're loose on your hands, then whenever you hook them in the tree and you go to pull up, then they pinch your hand. On the back side of them or the front side will pinch your hand. So the other thing about these is you can improvise these very simply as a weapon by going down to the local hardware store and getting one of these 3-pronged hooks that they use to dig up roots and things like that in the garden. You can either leave the handle on it, or you can take the handle off and make it so it hangs off your wrist by a cord. Either way, if once you get in the fight, you have the iron claw. All you got to do is pull that up and hook your fingers through it, and you've got the tekagi right there without having to go out and spend a fortune for some special-made tool. It really doesn't work that well. So it's
Wow.
And the other thing, you can use that also for climbing, by using it as a type of grappling hook. There are other grappling hooks that work a little bit better than one of these 3-prong type hooks because they tend to hook onto things better. But like I said, you can use it, for a grappling tool at the end of a rope. So
Amazing. Now, Master Kim, I've heard you talk about being in harmony with nature and the nature of things. How does the ninja use nature to his advantage?
Well, one good example is like when you're hunting, basically, or when you're stalking, into enemy territory. When I was younger, I used to go deer hunting. A lot of times I'd be sitting there in my little concealed area, waiting for the deer to come so I could get a shot at him. And I would be thinking the whole time, kill the deer, kill the deer, kill the deer. And of course, I never saw a deer because I was putting out these electrical signals. By concentrating on this way, I was actually emanating a field of electrical energy, and the animals are sensitive to these things, and they never
Wow.
came near me. And so one time when I was doing this, and going deer hunting, I kind of was really sleepy because we had gotten up really early that morning, and so I got on the deer stand, and then I fell asleep. And when I woke up, there were 3 or 4 deer right in front of me.
Wow.
And it occurred to me after that it was not a good idea to be sitting there thinking, kill the deer. The best way to do it was to relax and become part of nature and even sleep for a minute or two and become part of the environment. And then you were invisible. They couldn't see you. And then you could get, close enough to them to get a shot, so to speak. So the same thing applies when you're breaking into the enemy's headquarters. You want to be on the outside of the fence somewhere, and you want to be calm. You want to be in harmony with nature so that when you walk across the grass, the crickets don't stop chirping. The frogs don't stop chirping, okay? Because all of these things are natural burglar alarms. And if you've got crickets around your house or little frogs chirping all the time, and all of a sudden they stop, that means that there's something in the area that scared them, and they stop chirping. And so if you're in harmony with nature, when you walk across the grass, the frogs don't care. And so you don't set off the alarm, and then you have a much easier time, getting over the wall, to getting under the wall, or getting into the fortress, so to speak. So.
I see. Amazing. I've also seen documentaries of yours where you say a ninja can bury himself in a way where you're using a shovel, or you go out there and you're hiding from the enemy. You could bury yourself.
Yeah, you can do that, and it's one of the camouflage tricks, and it's actually it's very similar to what the military uses when they use the ghillie suits. And if you're under the brush there, if you're under the leaves or even under the topsoil if necessary, very few people think you're going to be laying there because you might get stepped on. And so if you're like wearing a ghillie suit, then you tend to blend into the ground pretty good. And people have walked right on top of these guys and never even known they were there. And so hiding under the ground is one of the earth techniques for either infiltrating or exfiltrating. And it's a very good place to hide. Also, in one of the ninja movies and even in one of Chuck Norris's shows, you can knock out a sentry and then lay underneath him. And then when somebody comes to investigate why he's unconscious, then you can attack him from surprise, actually, by being underneath the person that's laying on top of you. So which is a similar technique to being under the ground, basically. Because if you're under the ground and you're going to use it as a trap, you have to have something there to make the person come to you. And so, you can put a hat on your lap or whatever the case may be. Once the guy's in position, then you're ready to make the attack. But you got to get him into the position you want if you're using it as a trap. Like I said, if you're using it to escape, then you want to be as far away from the trail as possible, and not move even if the guy steps on you. So,
right. That makes sense. Now, symbols are very important to ninjitsu, specifically hand symbols, and these are probably the most powerful and magical hand symbols, known as the Kuji-kiri. I've seen this in movies like Enter the Ninja, and in the intro they're doing these hand symbols that you have shown in your work that you've talked about.
Right. Yeah, these are these hand symbols, according to Fujita's book on Kuji-kiri, and he's pretty much an expert on the subject. These are not necessarily symbols that are strictly related or strictly confined to ninjitsu. These symbols were used, he seems to think, even as far back as someplace in India or Tibet. But essentially what they are is they're ways of connecting the acupuncture channels that are in your hands so that you can channel the energy to certain areas of your body for healing purposes or for meditation purposes. It's not necessary to actually touch one point to the other, because, for instance, on the inside, on the outside edge of your index fingernail is the first point for the large intestine meridian, and large intestine meridian runs up the back of your arm, runs up the side of your neck, and crosses under your nose and ends on the opposite side of each nostril. So, but the acupuncture point you're looking for is the one right on the index finger or index fingernail on the index finger. This point in acupuncture medicine is known as young merchant. But the trick is to put these 2 points together by putting your index fingers together. Now, when you do that, you don't necessarily have to touch the 2 points together like you would if you were piercing them with a needle for acupuncture or pressing on them, for an acupressure technique. But as long as they're in proximity to each other, these acupuncture meridians are like a wire, and they have an electromagnetic field around them. And so when these points are in proximity, they're joined by this electromagnetic field. They don't necessarily have to be actually connected by a wire or anything like that because of this field. So by knitting your fingers together in these different positions, you connect different channels. And by doing that, like I said, you channel energy to different chakras, essentially, in your body. And most of the techniques that we're talking about here deal with things like in your endocrine system. But the Kuji-kiri techniques are also related to the 9 chakras. In most of the yoga systems and in most of the systems, they'll talk about 7 chakras, but there's actually 9 chakras in the Kuji-kiri system, because there's one that's black at the bottom and there's one that's white at the top, and the rest of them are the rainbow colors as they normally run. So, and these run from the base of your spine up to the top of your head. So each one of these Kuji-kiri hand positions deals or associates itself with one of these energy wheels that's on the Tai Chi poles in the center of your body, and can allow you to do incredible things like having a lot of stamina, for instance. And a lot of people, most people breathe between 12 and 16 times a minute, which is about every 5 seconds. I normally breathe about 4 times a minute because I've trained myself over the years doing Tai Chi and other exercises, Qigong exercises, things like that, to breathe very slowly and very deeply. And because of that, I have a lot of stamina that a lot of other people don't have. I always tell the story of when I was working as a plumber. I could always dig faster and longer ditches than any of the younger guys on the crew because they were not breathing the same way I was. And I had the stamina to just keep going regardless of how tired they might be. So I said, these are part of the things that you get these are benefits that you get after a long time of practicing martial arts, whether it's Ninjitsu or Tai Chi or some of these other systems. And it makes life very interesting. It makes life much better for you because when you're breathing slowly and deeply, like in a Tai Chi system, you're less likely to get infections and catch viruses and things like this. So because it's like with all of the breathing exercises in the science of breath, which is part of the pranayama system in yoga, by doing breathing in different patterns, hyperventilating or hypoventilating, you change the pH of your blood. And very often, if you make your blood a little bit more alkaline than like by hyperventilating, then it tends to kill viruses and germs that may be able to only live in a small pH range of your blood. So, like I said, in the past I've been known to bring down a fever and this kind of thing by doing breathing exercise. And so, plus they're very good for insomnia and things like that. So, Qigong is a whole system by itself, which is very interesting, and it's part of this ninjitsu system that I was able to get a glimpse of, really. So.
Right. So the hand signs and the breathing combined, I've heard has very magical, powerful. It's even said that you could slow down time or maybe even time travel and manipulate time. It's an amazing concept.
Oh yeah. Well, as an example, one of the things that I used to do from time to time was I'd just stop my heartbeat, and the way that I demonstrate this is by having a number 4 steel trap, which is outlawed in the state of Florida because it's a small steel trap that animals have been known to chew their legs off to get out of these things because they're so painful. But anyway, it's a small steel trap, and what I do is I set the trap, and then I stop my heartbeat, and then I put my hand in the trap, and then I hold the trap up and show everybody that my hand is in the trap, and then I put it back down on the ground, and I step on it, open it up, and bring it out, and show that my fingers are still there. Because this is an iron hand technique that you learn, and part of it is knowing how to stop your heartbeat. And so, and very often when I was working at the hospital, I would prove this to people by having them take my pulse. And then they would take my pulse, and after a minute or so, they would start going, it's starting to disappear. I can't hardly feel it. And pretty soon, it wouldn't be there at all. And they were just amazed. So, and it's not that difficult to do if you know the technique. And it's part of it's breathing, and part of it's part of it is muscular contractions, things like that.
Yes.
These are all things that he said that you learn when you're learning ninja magic, basically.
Wow. Tell us about your small fist technique. I mean, if you use that technique on, let's say, pressure points, I mean, that's a very powerful technique to use there.
Sure. There's a lot of what they call small fist techniques. One of them is like the needle finger, where you extend your index finger and you curl your other fingers back to kind of support it, and then you strike with the point of your index finger. That's one technique. One of the techniques is really good to do that on is the carotid point that's just under your ear. If you hit that point with the needle finger, and it's just behind the curl of your jaw, basically, or the angle of your jawline there. If you hit that point, really from almost any angle, but straight in is probably the best angle, you can stop somebody's heart. because you're hitting the carotid plexus.
Wow.
And the carotid plexus not only has the carotid artery, but also has the jugular vein, and it also has a little pack of nerves that has something to do with your heartbeat. And so if you hit that spot, you can upset the person's heartbeat. Another example I was just talking to somebody about the other day. If you have somebody stand in a horse stance and you stand facing them and you load your sword hand next to your right ear and you watch them, and when they start to breathe in, if you strike them even lightly on 1.1, which is on the shoulder where the pectoralis meets the deltoid, if you strike them with that sword hand, what you'll do is you'll drive the blood back into their heart and make it skip a beat. Now, if they cough, that means their heart started back again. And if they didn't cough, then you have to hit them in the solar plexus to start their heart again. So, and this is not even a heart. This technique won't even leave a bruise on you. Okay? So, and it all has to do with knowing when the guy is breathing and how to strike the point. And so, and like I said, you can do this with a fingertip pressure. There's another good point that I would like to refer to as the Vulcan nerve pinch. Behind the collarbone, there's the vagus nerve runs down from your neck down to your heart and down to your solar plexus. The phrenic nerve also runs down through there. So if you go behind the collarbone and you push straight back, you'll press on that nerve and it'll be painful, and whoever you're pressing on will fall away from you to try to relieve the pressure and make it stop hurting. But if you put your finger behind the collarbone and push down on that same point, okay, he'll drop right to his knees, and he won't even resist, okay, because it's going to hurt so bad he will drop to his knees. And so, because this is, a dim muck point, basically, or a pressure point that you can use to render somebody, absolutely helpless. If you do it from behind, then you can do it so that it actually looks very much like the Vulcan nerve pinch, because you put your hand on the guy's trapezius and you press down behind his collarbone with your middle finger. And he said very often that'll drop them to their knees. So like I said, all of these are small fist techniques that don't require a lot of impact and don't require a lot of surface impact. There's small, tiny areas that are very sensitive, and can be, struck or pressed, with just a fingertip pressure. So, and this is all part of the DEMMUC or the Death Touch system. Amazing.
One technique I like of yours the most is the putting out the candle technique. If you use that on like somebody's ears, for instance, you use that technique, it'll basically take away their equilibrium or knock them down, right?
Sure. And it will a lot of times it'll rupture the eardrum.
That's right.
There was the technique that a wrestler named Dr. Death one time was being interviewed by John Stossel for ABC News. And John Stossel asked him, he said, wrestling's all fake, right? And so the wrestler slapped him upside the head and knocked him to the ground.
I remember that.
Is that fake? Yeah, he said, is that fake? He said, that's an open hand slap. He said, I take 1,000 of those a day. He said, is that way? And the Stossel got up and he knocked him down again. And Stossel actually had a ruptured eardrum and lost part of his hearing because of that. And so, like I said, just clapping them on the ear like that, very often will rupture their eardrum. And this was a technique that was used by the commandos during World War II as a way of knocking out, German sentries. So,
Wow, that's amazing. I want to talk about Hollywood for a minute and your ideas of your thoughts on how Hollywood has portrayed ninjas over the years. But first, did any movie studios like Canon ever approach you to make a ninja film or to be an advisor?
No, they haven't yet. There was a movie a few years ago named Angel's Dance, which was a very well-done movie with Jim Belushi. And this is back in the 80s, shortly after I broke away from Paladin, they were going to make this movie, and they wanted to use one of my books as one of the books that this girl used to train herself to become empowered and save herself during the course of the movie. And so they contacted Paladin, and Paladin said they had to talk to me because all the copyrights reverted to me when I broke away from them. And so I said, I talked to the guy on the phone and said, I'd be honored, to have my book in the movie. And I didn't know at the time, of course, you probably could get paid for this, but I wasn't really interested in that. I was just, thrilled as I could be the movie was going to be made, and I'd have a piece of it. If you see the movie, there's a scene where she's hiding out in a motel because there's two assassins after her, and she's reading my book and a couple of other books to learn how to fight back. And then later on in the movie, she uses a shuriken and a couple other techniques that she might have gotten out of my book. But there's a book there supposedly about the CIA, and obviously the CIA would not give permission for the movie to use their book, because this book had like a homemade cardboard cover on it with CIA just kind of written in stencil. So it was, but they said, you can see my book laying on the bed. That's as close as I got to being in the movies as a ninja. I've been in several movies as an expert in the crowd scenes and things like that. But nobody, has approached me about being an advisor or doing any of the books at all. So we did a screenplay, The Amateur Adventures of Ashida Kim. That was going to be done in South Africa, but the company went bankrupt when the government changed, and so they said that one never got produced. So
now you had an exhibition match in South Africa, right? A Kumite exhibition match where you were in full ninja gear.
Yeah, it was really very hot, and the mask that I had on there was one of those nylon masks, and once those got wet with perspiration, it's very hard to breathe through them. And so it was really quite a struggle to do the whole match, but we had a good time doing it. So this some guys from an outfit called Martial Mania, and they were really popular at the time, and putting on matches all over South Africa. And one of the other matches that we went to was broadcast on SABC, which was the big TV network down there. And somebody found that I was in the audience, and so they got one of the commentators to interview me. And so I got in the ring, and we were talking about, what a great place South Africa was and this kind of thing. And I was down there to do seminars and whatnot. And so the lady, for some reason or other, something came up about having any trouble with anybody. And I said, well, there is this one fellow from England, okay, who seems to think South Africa is his territory, and it's not. I've talked to him several times about trying to get together and get this straightened out, but he doesn't even want to get together with me. So, let me put it this way. I'm in the ring, okay? Come on down and get in the ring, and we'll see who knows what, okay? So, as far as I know, they actually ran it on TV, and so it was like a real, championship wrestling sort of a challenge, and this guy never showed up. I mean, he was, because he really wasn't capable when he came right down to it, so.
Right. I've seen a lot of your moves have been they've been done by UFC fighters as of late. I've seen the eye poke, which is a way to escape. I see there's this heavyweight fighter named John Jones. He does it. You're not supposed to do it because you get disqualified, but he's caught doing it a lot. And we got guys like McGregor. I mean, they say it comes from the Bruce Lee school of Jeet Kune Do, but I've seen you also push the low kicks to the shin kicks as very devastating kicks. So your moves, your fighting style is used. I've seen it used by UFC fighters.
Yeah. Well, it's I think of it more as just being a particular set of techniques, that have been found to be really effective mostly for self-defense.
That's
because
right.
Even though there are katas in this particular system, the emphasis is primarily on self-defense, and that's one of the reasons why they go for even as Fujita said, you try to poke him in the eyes, try to hit him in the groin, and that gives you a chance to get away.
Yeah, because this is somebody that's trying to kill you, assault you. If you're a woman, you've written books on ladies' self-defense. I mean, this is somebody that you want to put down and make sure that they don't get up and hurt anybody, like I've heard you say before. And these are the moves that in sport, of course, they're not sportsmanlike, but in fighting for your life, it's completely legal. And
so it's so like I said, that's the forefront of it is essentially the self-defense. Like I said, the main technique is to throw sand in the guy's eyes and run away. And there's a dozen different ways of doing that. I mean, we had a grandmaster from Chicago come down one time to Florida, and one of the things he did during his seminar was that everybody put on one of these plastic face shields. And he says, okay, now I'm going to throw a handful of coins at you. You try not to blink. And nobody could do it.
Wow.
And so, even Chuck Norris can't block a handful of sand. So I mean, even there was one movie called Breaker Breaker where somebody tried to throw sand in his face, and he jumped to the side. Okay, but that's just as good as blinking, because once he's out of position, you can run. I mean, even if you don't hit him with the sand, it still serves the same effect if he moves. So once again, it's a technique that anybody can learn in 5 seconds. All they got to do is remember to do it. And like I said, a handful of coins works really well because it's a natural instinct to protect your eyes. And so, and a lot of people that I've talked to about doing the eye poke and things like this, they say, well, they don't really want to blind somebody. And I go, well, it's not that easy. Okay? I mean, your eyeball can take a lot of impact, for one thing. And the most common injury is torn eyelid, because the guy is very often, the guy will close his eyes at the last second, and your fingernail will cut his eyelid. Okay? But the pressure on his eyes will be enough to cause him to not be able to see what's going on. And so, like I said, but it's not likely that you're going to rupture his eyeball or anything like that, unless you're really trying really hard.
Well, if you practice the way that your techniques entail, like I've seen, one of your methods is you hang a little mask or a piece of paper, and you use your two fingers to poke through like the eyes. I mean, that if you practice that, then you're going to be deadly.
Oh yeah, you're going to be really devastating.
Deadly accurate.
You're going to have practiced sufficient penetration, to be really effective. And so it's so like I said, and that's a very good practice technique. That the thing with the Halloween mask.
That's right.
And it's traditionally you hang it in a door. I'm not really sure. I think that part of that is the psychology of, if I poke him in the eyes, I can get through the door. Sort of a cultural part of it. I mean, you can hang a glass anywhere and poke at it, but traditionally they hang him in the door, and I think they said that has to do with the idea of once you poke him in the eyes, you can escape, sort of a thing. So
amazing. Now, Hollywood has portrayed ninjas as masters of disguise. Going back to the James Bond films, You Only Live Twice. How accurate is that? And is it fair to say that ninja outfit originates from traditional Japanese kabuki?
A lot of times, especially, like I say, in our school, they would like to have a cover story. And so one of the cover stories was being a clown or a jester or magician, that sort of thing, because very often you can get in, to see the king, if you're telling funny stories. And so, and of course, Japanese are very strict, very very formal and everything. So not a lot of them would belong as jesters, but being able to juggle, being able to do acrobatic tricks and things like that, and perform as an entertainer, you weren't considered to be a threat. You were considered to be something that's going to amuse the king, so to speak, or amuse the shogun. So a lot of times these things were covers that people used, just like they would use the beggar technique. They would pretend to be, sitting at the gate, all huddled up, wearing torn up clothes and dirty clothes and things like this, and pretend to be begging until whoever they wanted came by, and then they'd jump up and stick a knife in them. And so it's the idea of using disguise as a cover story, even it goes as far as using it as a cover story, having another documented identity, that you could claim to be if you get caught being a spy and this kind of thing. Like I said, extends all the way up to that particular level. So the idea of using disguise as a way of getting into an area that you want to penetrate to get access to a target, would something that is part of the ninjitsu training. And nowadays, most of the time, if you're carrying a clipboard, you can go just about any place you want. because people think you're a supervisor or an inspector, and they think you're writing things down, and they think you're watching them, and they don't want to be watched. So most people will turn away if they see somebody walking around with a clipboard. And so by doing that, you pretty much walk in, especially if you got to be wearing a tie, you got to look like you are somebody, but that's a very simple disguise that you can use to penetrate a lot of what would ordinarily be considered, high security areas. So.
That reminds me of Fist of Fury, where Bruce Lee dresses up as a guy that works for the phone company, and then he dresses up as an old man, like you said, a beggar. So I mean, he was using ninjitsu techniques.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, he probably didn't think of them as being ninjitsu, but that they would fall into that category of disguise. So.
Amazing. Ninjas and hitman, are they the same thing? I mean, they were used for espionage and assassinations back in the feudal times in Japan.
Yeah, my understanding was, at least, like I said, our outfit, the idea was that you cut off the head of the snake and the rest of the snake dies. And so when there was going to be a problem, these guys would just go and either talk to the guy who was causing the problem in the middle of the night and explain to him what was going to happen if he didn't straighten up. And if that didn't work, then they would go back later on and kill him, because there's no way you could really stop these guys. I mean, they were so good at being able to penetrate, any compound or fortress at the time that, and it's very scary if you wake up in the middle of the night and there's somebody standing at the foot of the bed, even with a sword, telling you, well, you need to get out of town, and you start thinking to yourself, maybe I should. So it's so very often they would be able to stop these things just with intimidation. And just by going to the guy who was causing the problem, which of course required that they have enough intelligence gathering to know who was actually behind the problem. Because very often the people that seem to be causing the trouble are being used by somebody behind the scenes. So you have to have enough intelligence to know who to go and talk to about these things. But if later on, like I said, and you see it in the movies, some of these schools use small unit tactics, like in The Last Samurai. There's an attack on the village by a whole, herd of 50 or 60 ninjas, and it's very well done. And I have no doubt that they often did that sort of thing. But primarily, like I said, there was the idea of our school would be, to wait until the last guy, until the guy they wanted to kill was asleep, and then sneak in. I told a guy one time, we were talking about ninjutsu, and he was putting up a big challenge, all this sort of thing. And I told him, you don't understand it. Ninjutsu is not about getting on the mat and facing you down, okay? Ninjutsu is about sneaking up on you when you're asleep and killing you when you're in bed. Okay, so, if you still want to do this, let's talk about it. And so, of course, that kind of changed his feeling on the subject, because, but this is the thing about it, ninjutsu really is not about getting on the mat. It's really about sheer self-defense and going after the guy who's causing the trouble and straightening him out. And most of the time in our particular group, even though there are small unit tactics that we practice, most of the time we don't mount a whole army like they did in the last Samurai and attack a whole village like that. There was a much better version of it was in one of the early ninja movies with Shokosugi, where he burned a whole village by himself. Mostly our attitude was kind of like the Texas Rangers. You got one problem, you send one ninja. You don't send 50 guys.
That was Enter the Ninja with Kosugi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Now the term shinobi and ninja, how do they differ?
Yeah. The shinobi. My understanding was that it was a title that was given to an agent who basically had done really well during a particular war, and the thing was shinobi no jitsu or something along those lines, which essentially meant stealer in, or someone who was able to sneak in and do things covertly. And later on, the ninja symbol that we use commonly now became sort of a symbol of the particular schools of espionage and whatnot that were going on during the 16th century. And the Chinese translation for that same symbol does not mean nin does not mean quiet or silent or anything like that. It basically, in Chinese, that same symbol means perseverance in the face of adversity. And so, like I said, a lot of these things have multiple meanings and multiple layers of meanings. And so you have to be, as Joseph Campbell said one time, you have to not only read between the lines, but you have to look within the words to get the real meaning of whatever the writer is saying, basically. So,
that's right. It's in the details. That's right. How important is the movie Bloodsport to the IFAA and Black Dragon Fighting Society? I mean, it's very important. I mean, you Google, did Frank Dux win the Kumite? Even Google says that, yes, he did. It says it on there.
Yeah.
For any detractors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of controversy about him. One of the things that they said was that he was never in the Marine Corps. And but there's pictures of him being in the Marine Corps, and there's paperwork showing he was in the Marine, official, military paperwork showing he was in the Marine Corps, and he gets veterans benefits. So you don't get those unless you were honorably discharged. So the lie that he was not in the service is just something these guys made up. The thing is, it's like the Kumite for a long time, okay, was put on by, as the character says in the movies, for the fighters. It was not really for the public. It was for the fighters to test themselves against each other and see who was the best. And eventually they got to the point where there were people that were allowed to watch and things like this. But even in the early days, the people who were allowed to watch were people who very often had to give permission for this sort of thing to happen, and people who were in the government, and people who were in positions of power or had money. And they would watch these matches, and they would find the people that they thought were the best fighters or who had the techniques that they wanted, and they would recruit them to be in their little private armies or their bodyguards or whatever the case may be. And essentially this is the situation with Frank Dux. He attended one of these blood sport matches because Count Dante had died and was not able to go there, and so the invitation was still open for somebody from our chapter to attend, and so he went. And he did very well. And so because they did a study on him in Mexico, scientific research at the University of Mexico, and he has something going on with his nerves that gives him reflexes that are like half again as fast as most ordinary people. And that's one of the reasons why he can be 4 or 5 steps away from you, and you can hold a quarter in your hand, and he can get that quarter out of your hand before you can close it, because
right.
He's just that fast, and he just has that. And there's other people that have this particular ability, but he's one of the people that has this ability, and because of his performance at the Kumite and at other events like that, because he participated in a number of these underground events. He was recruited essentially to be an operative and go along on a mission to in Europe by the Central Intelligence Agency. And later on, he wrote a book about it, but they took up all the copies because he didn't get permission to write the book. And once you've done one of these, been operating with these people, anything with the Department of Defense, basically, you can't write a book about what you did unless they approve it.
That's right.
So, and of course, since he didn't get approval, they just snatched the book up, basically. But he had an amazing life and an amazing set of adventures. And the problem with it is these people all believe that there's people like James Bond and like Chuck Norris and Walker Texas Ranger and some of these other characters that are heroes, on the screen, and Jet Li and some of these other characters. They all believe these superhuman characters exist. But for some reason or the other, they don't want to believe that Frank Dux is one of them.
Right.
And so essentially, he just ignores them because they don't know what they're talking about, and it's a waste of time to argue with them because you're never going to convince them of anything. So, and I found that to be the case in my case too. When I first started out, there were a lot of people that called me a fake and a fraud and challenged me, and I went to a couple of challenges, and the other fellow didn't show up. So I quit going to the challenges because I figured that was just a game. So, but once again, a lot of people that considered me a fake and a fraud, but most of them are gone now.
You don't want to feed the trolls.
So, yeah, and like I said, eventually, even though I fought back in the early days, eventually I realized there was no point in arguing with these people. And so it's just, because they're going to believe what they want to believe, and it's and it doesn't matter whether it's, it doesn't really bother me anymore. It's because because, like I said, most of them really don't know what they're talking about. It's like Will Rogers said one time, I never met a man I didn't like. And so the problem with these people is they've never met me. Because if they meet me, they'll find out that I'm a nice guy.
If they read your work, they will be they should be convinced, if they have a brain in their head, that you know what you're talking about. I think it's interesting to note that Dante and Dukes also had the same teachers as in Senzo Tanaka, right? Who is the original champion of the Black Dragon Fighting Society. I mean, it was put on by a secret society originally, the Kokuro Kai, the Black Dragon Society from Japan, correct?
Right. Oh, yes, yeah. And that's the other thing about Tanaka was, if you see the movie Fearless, Tanaka is in that movie as one of the guys that who did a lot of fights in the big tournament at the end, where he's fighting all these people to prove that Chinese systems are good. And even though Tanaka technically wins because who's been poisoned and he dies on the mat, he still acknowledges him as the champion because he knows that the other guys cheated and fixed it so he could win. And so this is one of the things about supposedly about Tanaka's reputation was that he didn't put up with being jerked around by anybody. And so it was just one of those things of just talk to him and figure out what you're going to do, but don't surprise him because he don't like to be surprised. But he originally came over to America to stir up racial hatred, and he got hooked up with Dante, and it kind of backfired on him because instead of causing racial unrest, Dante embraced the whole teach the black man martial arts when nobody else will sort of an attitude, and that's one of the reasons why people didn't like him, was because he wasn't in the whole segregation thing. And so, like I said, he was one of the first people to teach, black students.
It made him infamous among the police. I said it made him infamous, Count Dante, for teaching blacks at that time. It made him infamous probably with the police, who stated they didn't want black people learning martial arts to defend themselves.
Exactly, because they were afraid of him.
Yeah.
They were afraid to learn martial arts that they'd be a race war. And so, of course, that never happened. But these people always find something to scare you with, So
that's their tool, is fear.
That's how they rule. And this is part of the problem, is that you don't know what's going to happen, from minute to minute, even most of the time. And so for somebody to say, well, don't do that because such and such might happen. Well, anything might happen, you never know. You have to do something, even if it's wrong. It's like George Patton said, it's better to have a bad plan and do it than to have no plan.
That's right.
Or just wait till something breaks. I mean, that's not a good plan. So.
Amazing. Now, Ashida, before we wrap up this first interview with you, which has been great, and thank you so much for being on, I want to talk about your 21-hit punch combo known as the Dance of Death, the Dance of the Deadly Hands. It's amazingly similar to Dante's kata, but yours looks much faster.
Well, mine has a couple of extra techniques in it. I originally learned Count Dante's form and practiced that, until I could do it in 5 seconds. And I did it at a couple of tournaments, but I hardly ever scored anything because most people didn't like Count Dante. And once they recognized what I was doing, they didn't give me good scores. But be that as it may, over the years, there have been a couple of additions made, which makes it a little bit different. There was one of the Black Dragon members out in California noticed that there was a point where you're just before you do the knee strike to the chest, where your hand is loaded near the guy's elbow, and so he added in a chop to the side of the neck at that point. And then so like I said, this is an auxiliary point, or auxiliary technique that's been added in. And for my part, Count Dante originally had it where you would drive the palm heel up to the guy's chin and then rake down across his eyes, and then you would go to the tiger claw. I added in the poke in the eyes because that was one of the best ninja techniques, and it's certainly something that you're close enough to do at that time, and it's also very effective. So I added that particular technique in, and like I said, there's a few other little minor modifications, but essentially it's the basis for it is Count Dante's original kata, because like I said, it has all the major fists and all the vital and fatal points in it.
Right. I've heard some detractors say that maybe some of the knife edge hand strikes aren't strong enough to break somebody's arm. If you're training Makiwara and you're strengthening your fist and iron fist, I think it's very much possible to break somebody's arm with a knife edge strike, especially if you harness your chi, your power. I mean, when you punch, you say ki. So you're basically saying power while you punch. You punch swiftly, and you hit the opponent when he's not expecting it by surprise. You could do a lot of damage. You could break something.
Sure. Well, and in Shotokan, that's one of the things they tell you to begin with is that you're not just blocking this guy's arm, you're striking his arm.
That's right.
And or his leg, and you want to strike it hard enough to break it if you can. And the trick to doing that, or part of the trick to doing that, is to not overextend. If you're hitting the guy's arm, if you stop your block where it's supposed to be, okay, it'll be enough damage to his arm because you're going to knock it out of its path that it was getting on. But if you hit the guy's arm and you continue on to push it out of the way, then you've lost a lot of your impact because it's more of a push than it is a strike that way. So, like I said, there's lots to be said for how to hit the guy's arm, but and also where. I mean, there's lots of good points. If you hit like pericardium 6, you can knock somebody out just by hitting them on the wrist. So it's just a matter of how to hit and where to hit. And like I said, it's not as hard to break a bone as people think. So.
Right. Now, before we wrap up, Ashida, talk to us about your the invisible tattoo, the sign of the ninja, the invisible tattoo.
Okay. A lot of schools, especially judo schools, like for their black belt level students to get a tattoo of some sort to indicate that they've, achieved a certain level. And I think this is part of the Shaolin tradition of burning the tiger and the dragon on your forearms with the giant cauldron like they showed in Kung Fu. It's a way of letting people know, that you have achieved a certain level of skill, so to speak. In ninjitsu, of course, you didn't want to do that because you didn't want to admit that you were a ninja. It's kind of like with Fight Club. Most of the time, people start talking about ninjitsu, and the real ninjas would kind of just leave the room because they wouldn't. It's like you don't talk about Fight Club, you don't talk about ninjitsu because it's just a secret. And so when I first learned it, it was a secret. It was only after Stephen Hayes started, talking about it that a lot of people came out and explained, what their part of it. But at any rate, so like I said, that's part of the anonymity, of ninjitsu is denying that it exists, so to speak, and which is part of disinformation, which is part of being a spy and keeping people, deceived about what's going on, which is, the essence of the whole system when you come right down to it. So.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you for being on this inaugural podcast of my new show, the Martial Arts Icons podcast. We look forward to having you on many more times. Would you agree?
Oh, sure. Love to.
Yeah.
I love martial arts. I love talking about it. I love practicing it. It's been a wonderful life.
For more interviews with Ashida Kim, tune into Martial Arts Icons podcast on YouTube. For more on Ashida Kim and to purchase his books, be sure to visit www.dojopress.com.
Mind Control has really been one of the best books, and is kind of recognized as kind of a classic on that particular subject. So, and I'm really glad I was able to put that one together and help a lot of people out with it.